Sometimes life doesn't teach its lessons loudly. Sometimes it waits, it watches, and then one day, out of nowhere, it hits a man with the truth he spent years avoiding. That the woman he took for granted wasn't just another person in his life. She was the part of his world he never knew he depended on. And by the time he realizes it, you're already gone. And that's when it hits him hardest. You were never meant to be replaced. You were meant to be missed, in a world that moves too fast, where people come and go like passing shadows. It's easy to believe that nothing lasts anymore. It's easy to think everyone is replaceable, everyone forgettable, everyone temporary. But every once in a while, someone walks into your life who reminds you that real connections still matter. Someone who brings honesty, depth, and sincerity at a time when most people are just performing versions of themselves. And when that person leaves, you feel it. You feel it in the quiet moments, in the spaces where they used to fit, in the parts of your life that suddenly feel a little too empty. Because real isn't something you lose and move on from. Real is something that stays with you long after you think you've let it go. And that's who you were. You offered something genuine, something rare, something that didn't depend on trends or moods or convenience. You weren't trying to impress. You weren't trying to be the cool one, the mysterious one, or the one who held back feelings just to gain some sort of imaginary power. You showed up as yourself, unfiltered, honest, and present. And the truth is, most people don't know what to do with someone like that. They're so used to surface-level interactions that when they finally meet someone with depth, they mistake it for something ordinary. They think it's just another connection they can treat casually, replace easily, walk away from without consequences. But time has a strange way of revealing the truth. Because after the noise settles, after the distractions fade, after the temporary people show their temporary nature, the gravity of what they lost starts to pull at them. Suddenly, the small things you did become big things. The kindness you offered becomes rare. The way you listened, really listened, becomes something they can't find again. They start missing the warmth in your voice, the calm in your presence, the way you made them feel understood without forcing them to pretend. It hits them slowly, then all at once, you weren't like the others. You weren't someone they could forget. You weren't someone they could replace. You see, most people today are afraid to be real. They're scared that honesty will make them vulnerable, that caring too much will make them weak, that expressing emotions will make them seem desperate. So they hide behind mixed signals, half-meant conversations, and relationships that never fully take shape. But you didn't hide. You loved with your whole heart. Even when it wasn't easy, you gave comfort without expecting anything. You offered loyalty without making someone earn it through games or manipulation. You were the kind of person who remembered details, who showed up on bad days, who stayed consistent even when life became chaotic. And what's more unforgettable than consistency in a world where everything feels temporary? There's a moment in almost every real connection, though most people don't recognize it while it's happening, where someone quietly becomes the anchor in another person's life. It could be the way you laughed at his jokes when he barely believed in himself. It could be the way you saw the good in him when he was surrounded by people who only noticed his flaws. It could be the way you sat with him during the moments he didn't want to talk, trusting that your silence was enough. These are not acts people forget. These are not gestures that fade. These are the parts of you that stay long after you stop showing up. And when he left, or when you finally decided to walk away, it probably seemed easy for him at first. People often confuse freedom with relief, emptiness with peace. But real freedom doesn't come from losing someone who grounded you. And real peace doesn't come from creating a void where a heart once stood. Over time, life began to show him the difference. The conversations with new people felt rehearsed. The chemistry felt forced. The small talk felt hollow. He realized that no matter how many faces he met, none of them carried the quiet strength you had. None of them made him feel safe enough to be honest. None of them offered a connection that felt alive instead of artificial. It's funny how we remember people not for what they gave us materially, but for how they made us feel. And you made someone feel human again. You made someone feel seen in ways they didn't even know they needed. You made someone believe that emotional depth wasn't something to fear, but something to treasure. And when that disappears, it leaves a mark, not a wound, though sometimes it feels like one, but a reminder of what real love, real connection, real presence looks like. The world is full of temporary relationships, but genuine souls, they are few. And that's why you stand out. That's why he remembers you. Because you weren't someone who occupied space. You filled it. You didn't just speak. You connected. You didn't just care. You cared deeply, fully, without hesitation. And that level of sincerity, it's not something people come across every day. It's not something they get to replace with the next person who shows interest. It's something that lingers, echoing in their memories, resurfacing in moments they least expect. You offered loyalty in a world where loyalty is a myth. You offered comfort in a time when everyone hides their pain. You offered effort when effort became too heavy for most people to lift. And he knows that now. Maybe he didn't appreciate it when you were there. Maybe he thought your kindness was guaranteed. Maybe he assumed that someone like you would always be available, always forgiving, always waiting. But real people eventually get tired. Even generous hearts have boundaries. And when a person like you finally steps away, it's not anger driving them. It's clarity. Clarity that you deserve someone who actually recognizes your worth. Someone who meets your effort. Someone who doesn't treat your heart like it's replaceable. So he misses you. Not because he can't find someone else, but because he can't find someone like you. And deep inside, you probably feel it too. You feel the strength of what you brought, the truth of who you were, the courage it took to stay real in a world that teaches you to be fake. No matter what happened, no matter how things ended, never forget this. Offering something real is never a weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do, and the right people will see it. The right people will value it. The right people won't let it go. And those who only realize your worth once you're gone, they weren't meant to keep you. You know, there's something almost sacred about the kind of peace a person brings into someone's life. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, steady kind that makes you feel like the world isn't as heavy as it used to be. You brought that. You were the calm in the middle of someone's storm, and maybe they didn't recognize it at first. Most people don't. When someone brings chaos, it's obvious. It shouts. It demands attention. But peace whispers. And sometimes people don't realize how rare that whisper is until it's gone. You weren't the type to start fights for no reason. You weren't the one who kept emotional scorecards. You weren't playing games or fueling insecurity. Instead, you created a space where honesty felt safe, where emotions weren't judged, where conversations didn't feel like battles. You brought clarity, not confusion. Warmth, not coldness. Presence, not pressure. In a world where so many relationships feel like a constant tug of war, you offered something a lot of people secretly crave, but are too afraid to ask for: emotional rest. There's this moment in many relationships, though people rarely notice it when it's happening, where someone becomes the emotional anchor without even trying. Maybe it was the way you listened when he talked about things he never told anyone. Maybe it was the way you didn't rush him, didn't force him to be stronger than he felt, didn't make him feel ashamed for being human. Maybe it was the way your presence alone softened the edges of his day. That's the thing about peace. It doesn't show off, but it transforms everything it touches. And he felt it, even if he didn't say it. Especially if he didn't say it, because peace is a strange gift. People often enjoy it without realizing where it came from. They mistake it for their own calmness, not understanding that someone else is the reason their world feels lighter. They believe the good days are normal until they're suddenly not. It's only when the storms return that they start looking for the person who once stood between them and the chaos they never learned to control. You were that person, the buffer, the grounding force. But most people don't know how to hold on to peace. They confuse it with boredom. They think stability means a lack of excitement. They start believing that real love has to be dramatic, loud, filled with unpredictable highs and lows. And in chasing that, they push away the one person who made their life feel manageable, balanced, steady. But chaos gets exhausting, drama gets old, and excitement without direction eventually becomes emptiness. Then one day, out of nowhere, they wake up and feel the weight of everything they didn't understand. They realize that the energy they're surrounded by now drains them instead of lifting them. Conversations feel like arguments waiting to happen. Every small issue feels like a storm. Their peace doesn't return, not because they lost their balance, but because they lost the person who helped them find it in the first place. And that's when they start missing you in ways they can't even explain. They miss the conversations that didn't feel like a battle of egos. They miss the softness of your voice when they were overwhelmed. They miss the way you made them feel understood without forcing them to defend themselves. They miss the feeling of coming home, even if it was just through a call or a message or your presence beside them. Peace is unforgettable. Chaos is replaceable. You brought something into his life that he can't recreate with anyone else, because peace doesn't come from just anyone. It comes from people who are emotionally mature, self-aware, compassionate, steady, people who have done enough healing to not pour their old wounds into others, people who know how to listen without trying to fix everything, how to support without smothering, how to love without creating fear. You brought that, not because you were perfect, but because you were intentional. You cared deeply. You meant what you said. You didn't weaponize your emotions. You didn't force him to chase after unpredictable moods or decode hidden messages. You gave him stability, something he probably didn't realize he needed until he started living without it. There's a study in emotional psychology that says people remember most the individuals who made them feel safe, not excited, not impressed. Safe, because safety is what lets people open up, relax, be vulnerable, and experience connection without fear. You created that environment, even if he didn't fully understand how rare it was. And when you left, whether by choice or by consequence, he didn't just lose a relationship, he lost the emotional sanctuary he didn't know he relied on. And here's what makes peace so powerful when it's gone. Chaos doesn't just come back quietly. It crashes in. Suddenly the little things become overwhelming. The loneliness gets louder. The world feels a little colder. Every conversation with someone new feels shallow, rushed, filled with tension he never had with you. He starts to realize that not all connections soothe the heart. Some only stir up old insecurities. Not everyone brings calmness. Some create friction without even trying. Not everyone listens the way you did, without judgment, without impatience, without making him feel small. And as he tries to replace what he lost, he discovers something he never expected. Peace isn't common. Peace isn't casual. Peace isn't something you stumble into. It's something you build with someone who knows how to love gently, speak truthfully, and stand steadily. And that kind of connection isn't found on every corner. So he misses you, not because you were simply part of his life, but because you were the part that made life easier. You made emotion feel manageable. You made vulnerability feel safe. You made affection feel honest. And when someone loses that, they don't move on quickly. They don't forget. They don't replace. They search and they search, and eventually they realize they're not searching for a person. They're searching for a feeling you brought. A feeling that became the most peaceful part of their life. The kind of feeling that stays with them long after you're gone, You know, one of the most powerful things a person can do for someone they care about is push them. Gently, honestly, consistently, toward the version of themselves they're meant to become, not out of control, not out of ego, but out of love, out of belief, out of the quiet understanding that comfort can sometimes become a trap, and that staying the same is far more dangerous than growing. And that's exactly what you brought into his life. You didn't just make him feel comfortable, you challenged him to be better. You believed in the parts of him that he couldn't see, or refused to see, or was too afraid to acknowledge. The truth is, many people say they want someone who inspires them, someone who elevates them, someone who brings out the best in them. But when they finally receive that kind of person, they don't always know how to handle it, because being truly seen is uncomfortable. Being held accountable is uncomfortable. Being pushed toward your potential is uncomfortable. It forces people to confront their fears, their flaws, their excuses. And not everyone is ready for that. You didn't push him with pressure. You pushed him with presence. Maybe it was the way you encouraged his dreams, even the ones he barely whispered out loud. Maybe it was the way you reminded him he was capable of more discipline, more honesty, more vulnerability, more courage. Maybe it was the way you refused to let him stay stuck in the same patterns that were hurting him. You weren't trying to change him, you were trying to show him the strength he already had. But here's the thing about growth: it asks for effort. It asks for discomfort. It asks for consistency, and many people choose comfort over progress without even realizing it. They choose the easy path, the familiar path, the one that requires the least amount of self-reflection. And when someone comes into their life who doesn't let them hide, who doesn't let them settle, who doesn't let them shrink into old versions of themselves, they panic. They pull away. They convince themselves that the challenge is too much, that the relationship is too demanding, that the expectations are too high. But deep down, the truth is simple. It's not the connection that's heavy. It's the weight of their own unrealized potential. You saw something in him that other people missed. While others accepted his excuses, you questioned them. While others let him drift, you reminded him of direction. While others kept him comfortable in his limitations, you opened the door to what he could actually become. And at the time, he didn't understand the value of that. Most people don't appreciate the person who challenges them until they're gone. Because once you left, the world around him didn't hold him to the same standard anymore. No one asked him to grow. No one held him accountable. No one looked at him with the kind of belief that makes a person stand taller just to see if they can live up to it. Suddenly, he was surrounded by people who accepted his excuses instead of questioning them. People who let him stay comfortable even when it was holding him back. People who didn't expect anything from him beyond what he already was. And that's when he felt it. The loss of someone who cared about his future, not just his present. He probably didn't realize how many of his small improvements were influenced by you. The days he tried harder because you believed in him. The decisions he made because you showed him he deserved more from life. The habits he tried to break because you reminded him he was capable of better. The courage he found because you stood beside him long enough for him to feel strength again. And when you left, those improvements didn't disappear overnight, but the direction did, the motivation did, the spark did. Growth is hard to maintain alone. And the truth is, very few people bring out the best in us the way someone who truly believes in us does. There's something beautiful and terrifying about being motivated by someone you love. It makes you want to rise to the occasion. It makes you want to become someone they can trust, someone they can rely on, someone they can be proud of. But it also means facing the parts of yourself you've avoided, your insecurities, your mistakes, your fears, your weaknesses. You were the mirror he needed, but didn't know how to look into. You reflected back his potential, not just his present. And sometimes that reflection is too bright for people who have been living in the shadows for too long. He may have mistaken your encouragement for pressure. He may have confused your belief in him with unrealistic expectation. He may have seen your push for growth as criticism rather than care. Because when someone isn't used to being supported at a high level, they often interpret it as discomfort. They convince themselves that comfort equals love and challenge equals conflict. But the truth is the opposite. Comfort can keep a person stagnant. Challenge, when it comes from a place of love, can change a person's life. And you changed him, whether he admits it or not. Maybe you inspired him to dream bigger than the environment he grew up in. Maybe you pushed him to take responsibility instead of repeating patterns. Maybe you encouraged him to open up emotionally when he had spent years hiding behind silence. Maybe you believed in a future for him that he didn't think he deserved. Those things matter. They leave marks, not scars, marks. Marks of growth, marks of transformation, marks of becoming. And now he feels the absence of that push, not because he suddenly wants to change, but because he misses the person who made change feel possible. He misses the way you saw him, not as he was, but as he could be. He misses the way you didn't let him settle for less than his potential. He misses the version of himself he was becoming because of you. It's strange how people often realize the value of the ones who push them the most only after they've gone. They look back and suddenly the moments that once felt uncomfortable now feel meaningful. The conversations that once felt intense now feel important. The challenges that once felt frustrating now feel like gifts. And they start to understand something they weren't ready to see before. You weren't asking too much. You were asking for effort, accountability, honesty, growth, things that only people who care deeply ever demand. And that's why he misses you. Not because you made him feel comfortable, but because you made him feel capable. Not because you made life easy, but because you made life purposeful. Not because you accepted who he was, but because you believed in who he could become. And people don't forget the ones who changed their lives. They don't replace the ones who challenge them with love. They don't move on from the ones who helped them grow. And whether he admits it or not, your impact is still shaping him. Waves don't disappear after they crash, they ripple. And you were a wave in his life, a powerful one. You know, people have this dangerous habit of assuming that good hearts stay forever. That the person who forgives easily will keep forgiving. That the one who understands deeply will keep understanding. That the one who loves without holding back will never reach a breaking point. And he fell into that habit with you. He thought your presence was guaranteed. He thought your patience was endless. He thought your loyalty meant you'd never step away. No matter how many times he disappointed you, ignored your needs, or took you for granted, he believed you'd always be there, until one day you weren't. It's strange how the human mind works. We get so used to someone's kindness that we stop seeing it. We become so comfortable with someone's consistency that we forget how rare it is. He didn't realize that the things you did for him weren't written in some invisible contract. You weren't obligated to stay. You weren't bound to keep giving pieces of yourself just to keep the connection alive. You were choosing him every day, even on the days he made it hard. But he didn't see that, not clearly, not until it was too late. People often talk about losing someone, but there's a deeper kind of loss. The one you don't notice until silence replaces the voice you once took for granted, until absence replaces the presence you once thought was permanent. He didn't just lose you, he lost the version of you that kept trying. The version that kept believing in him. The version that stayed even when you had every reason to walk away. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You didn't walk away because your heart shut down. You left because you finally realized that loving him shouldn't mean hurting yourself. You left because you reached a point where silence felt safer than the effort he kept wasting. You left because you understood something he didn't. Love is not supposed to be one-sided, and loyalty is not supposed to feel like sacrifice. But he didn't see the signs, or maybe he saw them, but convinced himself that someone like you doesn't leave, that someone who has stayed this long will stay longer, that someone who keeps forgiving will keep doing it endlessly, that someone who gives so much will never reach the point where giving starts to feel like losing themselves, and then you were gone. Not with a dramatic exit, not with anger, not with revenge, just gone in the way people disappear when they've finally had enough. Quietly, calmly, with a kind of peace that only comes from choosing yourself after choosing someone else for far too long. That's the moment everything shifted for him. At first, he might have pretended he didn't care, that he was fine, that he didn't need you, that he could move on the same way he assumed you would. But pretending is easy until reality starts to seep into the cracks, until he notices that the messages you once sent aren't coming, until he realizes that the door he thought was always open is now closed, until he feels the weight of your absence in the places where he once expected your presence without question. There's a particular ache that comes from losing someone you thought would always stay. It's not just sadness, it's not just regret, it's shock. It's disbelief. It's the sudden awareness that you were wrong, very wrong, about someone's willingness to tolerate being unappreciated. And that's what hit him, slowly at first, then with a force he wasn't ready for. He started noticing the little things, the peace you brought, the effort you gave, the way you listened, the way you cared, the messages you used to send just to check in. The comfort of knowing someone had your back even on your worst days. The quiet love that didn't need attention to be felt. He noticed all of it when it was no longer his. He thought your loyalty was his right. He didn't understand that your loyalty was a gift. One you chose to stop giving when he stopped cherishing it. People forget that even the strongest hearts get tired. Even the most patient souls reach a limit. Even the kindest people eventually understand that staying in the same place is the same as choosing pain. And you, with all the love you had, finally chose something different. You chose yourself. You chose peace. You chose the version of you that no longer wanted to shrink so he could stay comfortable. You chose the life you deserved. And now he feels it. He feels the void where your presence used to be. He feels the silence where your voice once softened his days. He feels the difference between someone who truly cared and the people who only care when it's convenient. He's realizing that you weren't coming back this time, that there are no more second chances waiting for him, that the door he once assumed was permanent has closed gently but firmly. And here's the thing he never understood until now. People don't leave when they stop loving. They leave when the other person stops noticing. You didn't stop loving him. You stopped losing yourself for him. And that's a lesson he'll carry for the rest of his life. Because once a person learns what it feels like to lose someone who would have stayed forever, they never stop thinking about it. He thought you'd always be there. He thought your heart was his to return to whenever he felt ready. He thought your love was something he could mismanage without consequences, until the day he realized that even the strongest love can only survive so much neglect. And now, he understands something he never took seriously while he had you. People leave when staying becomes self-betrayal. People walk away when their kindness is mistaken for weakness. And people like you, rare, genuine, loyal, full-hearted, don't get replaced. They get remembered. They get missed. They become the lesson someone carries long after the story ends. There comes a moment in a man's life when he finally understands that some people don't just pass through. Some people change the way the world feels around him. And when you walked away, he didn't just lose a relationship. He lost a presence, a warmth, a force that quietly shaped him in ways he didn't even notice until it was gone. You weren't just a chapter in his life. You were the part of the story that made everything else make sense. And now, every silent moment he sits with, every familiar street he walks down, every small reminder that hits him out of nowhere. It tells him the same truth: you didn't fade. You didn't disappear. You left something behind that he can't shake, no matter how much time passes. Because you were never meant to be a memory. You were always meant to be a mark, the kind people carry with them long after they tell everyone they've moved on. A mark doesn't fade with time, it deepens. It becomes part of the person who carries it. It reminds them of who they were when you were around, and who they had the chance to become but didn't. It reminds them of the peace you brought, the gentleness you offered, the honesty you lived with. He can try to distract himself, hide behind excuses, convince himself he's fine, but life has a way of bringing him back to the truth. What you gave was rare, and rare things don't let go easily. You showed him what loyalty feels like, not the loud, dramatic kind, the steady, consistent, comforting kind that shows up even when no one asks. You were the person who remembered the small things, the way he liked his coffee, the dreams he didn't want to admit out loud, the fears he hid behind humor, the moments he pretended didn't hurt. You held space for him in a way he didn't know how to return. And that right there is the mark you left, the kind of care that's impossible to recreate with someone who's not you. You made him feel seen, not through grand gestures, but through the kind of attention only someone who actually cares offers. He remembers that now, maybe not in the dramatic, movie-like moments, but in the quiet ones. The way he reaches for his phone at night and stops himself. The way he walks into a room and feels like something's missing, even if he can't name what. The way he hears your voice in his mind when he's about to make a bad decision, because you always wanted better for him, even when he didn't want better for himself. That's what a mark does. It stays, it guides, it whispers. It reminds him that he once had someone who believed in him more deeply than he believed in himself. And he misses that belief now. He misses the way you challenged him, not to change who he was, but to step into the version of himself he always avoided. You didn't settle for his excuses. You didn't applaud his bare minimum. You held him to a standard he didn't like at the time, but now realizes was the way you loved. And here's the truth he wrestles with no one else has held him that way since. No one else has cared enough to push him. No one else has loved him with enough depth to expect more from him. That's the kind of mark that keeps echoing long after the relationship ends. Friends might tell him, just move on. People might say, you'll find someone else, but deep down he knows. You were different. You weren't perfect, but you were genuine. You weren't trying to impress him, you were trying to grow with him. That's rare. That's not something he can replace with someone who just wants temporary comfort or a distraction. You brought meaning, you brought honesty, you brought a connection rooted in something deeper than convenience. And that kind of connection imprints itself on the soul. He notices the difference now when he meets someone new and feels the emptiness behind forced laughs, when he talks to someone who doesn't really listen, when he realizes how heavy the silence feels without you, because your silence was peaceful, and this silence feels like absence. He compares without meaning to compare. He looks for glimpses of you in people he knows can't replicate what you gave. Because what you offered wasn't a trait, it was a presence shaped by who you are, what you've lived through, what you've healed from, and how you love. And no one else has that combination. And the most powerful truth of all is this: he knows he lost something meaningful. Not because you said it, not because you punished him, but because life revealed it to him piece by piece, through moments that look ordinary on the outside, but feel heavy on the inside, through memories that don't leave, through realizations that sting more with time, through the quiet understanding that the love you gave is still living inside him, even if you're no longer around to offer it. That's what it means to leave a mark. It means you shaped a heart, shifted a mind, changed a path, even if that change came after you left. and he'll carry that, not because he wants to, but because he can't help it. Because you mattered. Because you were real. Because you were rare. Because you were the kind of woman who doesn't just walk into someone's life, you transform it in ways that echo long after you've walked away. And he still misses you for that very reason. Not because he's lonely. Not because he wants something familiar. But because he finally understands what he once had and what he'll never find in the same form again. You weren't meant to be replaced. You weren't meant to be forgotten. You were meant to be remembered in the ways that matter most, through the impact you make, the growth you inspire, and the imprint you leave behind that time can't erase. In the end, the truth is simple. Not everyone who walks away leaves the same kind of silence behind. Some people leave an emptiness that echoes. Some leave memories. But you left growth, clarity, strength, and a version of love that refuses to fade. And that is why he still thinks about you. Not because you're replaceable, but because you never were. You were real in a world that celebrates the temporary. You were steady in moments where most people would have walked away. You were the reminder that love still has depth, and that connection still has meaning. And now he carries that with him, whether he admits it or not. He carries the lessons you taught, the peace you brought, the standards you set, and the version of himself he could have become with you by his side. That's the impact of someone who mattered. That's the legacy of someone who loved with honesty. And that's why your absence still speaks louder than anyone else's presence. So don't doubt your worth. Don't question the power of what you gave. When a person misses you long after you're gone, it's not because you were easy to replace. It's because you were the rare kind of soul people spend a lifetime searching for and only realize the value of when it's no longer theirs to keep.